Great. So my session's more about blooming and thriving and the right workplace option for you. And I kind of use the analogy of finding the right garden for yourself. Wanted to start off with this quote from Alexander. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not necessarily the flower. And that's how I really kind of think about all of us. When we're looking for the next workplace, when we're looking for our next teammate, when we're looking for the next corporate culture, what is it that we're really aligning with and what is the right match for us? Because not everything is meant for us. And so, why would you hear that from me? I'm currently a mid-30s professional with over a decade of experience in tech, and it's taken me some time to truly understand what type of environment for me that allows me to bloom and thrive as well. And so, in some ways, you would say that I've been a career Goldilocks. I've carefully assessed what wasn't working for me, both internally and externally, made different, jumps and hoops throughout my career. And I've worked in a variety of environments from big tech to startups to entrepreneurship. So maybe you necessarily wouldn't have to if you have a better decision at hand. And so today we'll explore 3 different workplace sizes and options for you to identify the best fit for your next career leap, potentially in 2025, that aligns most authentically with who you are. And so before diving in, just wanted to give you some context on what we'll cover. I'll quickly kind of go over my journey as a professional in tech. We'll head into the garden options that you can kind of assess. Of course, there's more than 3, but today we'll cover kind of what would it take to kind of think about Fortune 500 companies versus startups and entrepreneurship. We'll do a quick assessment time of weighing out the pros and cons, and feel free to do that yourself as well after this meeting and session. And then how do we prepare for what's next in 2025? So hello, my name is Janet again. I have 12 plus years of experience in consumer tech, augmented reality and virtual reality industries, and also in creator and developer marketing. I'm currently a career and business coach at Embrace Now. I'm also a product marketer at Meta, but that's not where I actually started my career. I started off in finance and strategy at Apple, headed over to VC for a little bit, and also worked in Meta and Snap within the AR/VR realm. But I've also worked in Y Combinator startups, including Funders Club and Clever, and also in venture-backed startups like High Fidelity, and founded my own VR company back in the day in 2015. So want to give you a little bit more context as well, personal and professional. As I mentioned before, really was able to navigate and try different, bigger sizes, smaller sizes, different team dynamics, corporate versus entrepreneurship throughout my professional career so far. But I also have international background as well. Was born in South Korea, lived in Indonesia when I was a child, and was privileged to work in Japan and also studied in France. And obviously most of my professional career, in contrast though, has been in California, predominantly in San Francisco and LA. Okay, so now you guys know where I've kind of quickly jetted throughout my career. Based on my personal experience, wanted to share my personal point of view on what it was to work in Fortune 500 versus venture-backed startups versus entrepreneurship. And caveating that, there's other perspectives that you might want to hear from, but this is just kind of 2 cents for you to consider. Alrighty, so starting with big tech Fortune 500, just based on my experience having worked at Meta, Apple, and Snap. Some of the pros include that, hey, this might be the least financially risky jump that you might make in your career. Chances are it's at or above market pay with RSUs, stock grants, annual bonuses that you might take advantage of. I would say it's predictable path to promotion more than kind of many other options out there. It's kind of what we, quote unquote cliche call it climbing the ladder. Another good thing about Fortune 500 is that it's a known and reputable brand. And so there's high recognition on your resume that gives interviewing edge whenever you need to skip or try out for other opportunities in the future. And it allows you to specialize in a specific subdomain. And so I think specialization is something that a lot of bigger corporate companies really emphasize, and for you to really own and be an expert in very specific thing that you've been hired for. There's also great lifestyle support, whether that be 401k matching, stipends for your wellness, premium health insurance. If you're considering, growing your family, there's definitely family leave that you can rely on. And you have the ability to network and meet people kind of on a grander scale from an international perspective as well with community groups. But there's also cons too for you to consider. It's who you know and what you know. I would say work input doesn't necessarily correlate to career advancement or growth just on its own. Advancement comes with socio-emotional soft skills that you may acquire throughout your life and career. You need to learn how to navigate different organizations, different teams, and there's a potential slower path to bigger leaps and title changes and pay bump throughout your career within a specific big company. There's also slower org changes and a work pace. It's tougher to switch into different roles and departments once you really specialize in something that you are known for. And I would say there's less ownership, to be honest. It's a shared ownership. And there could be something that, oftentimes I've heard in my community as well as what's described as golden handcuff syndrome. Even if you don't feel completely fulfilled in your role, it's hard to leave because of all the pros that you see on the left side. Now let's talk about venture-backed startups. When I think about venture-backed startups, these are particularly startups that have gotten a little bit of traction, perhaps a little bit of MVP. They might be at Series C, Series A, Series B, and they've had financial funding from outside investors. And so some of the pros of joining a venture-backed startup is that you get to really jump around and explore the breadth and depth of your role. The good thing is it's a very small team compared to a big corporate company. And so it's more flexible in terms of defining your career. Maybe you started off joining as a customer support, but when the company is growing and you have so much product and customer know-how, maybe they'll reach out to you and say, hey, Janet, would you be open to exploring product management? And you would say, hey, I've never considered it, but this is something that I might want to transition naturally within the company. And even if you leave, you're able to carry that experience with you to your next company. It's venture backed with a certain level of risk mitigated with, runway within the company and the startup based on outside funding. And you may be surrounded by other ambitious go-getters. Startup mentality in a nimble team that might really get you going and to, potentially reach a higher upside down the line. So obviously you might not have RSUs, but there's definitely stock option pool. But you may have to maybe also consider that there's a range of different startups and different sizes. And so for you to really get to the higher upside, you may have to join earlier in VC funding stage, whether that be seed, Series A, versus joining a company that's right before, pre-IPO. The cons. Venture-backed startups have higher unpredictability compared to the corporate world. You need to really take what comes at you day by day, could feel a bit chaotic at times. Definitely a nimble team, as I mentioned before. You're going to be stretched thin sometimes and often have responsibilities outside of your normal scope. I still remember when I was the only marketer at a Series C startup, and I was literally handing out $50 gift cards and having people come in to do, user research and user interviews. And so definitely not within my scope, but you do what you can and you make really fun experiences out of it. Recruiters may not easily recognize you based on the lack of startup brand recognition potentially, if it's small enough. And the base pay is likely lower than joining a big tech, less employee perks. And, to be honest, team may shrink or expand at a rapid rate, just depending on how the startup is doing, which may impact you, your team, but also the org at large. And last but not least, entrepreneurship/freelance. If you were thinking about starting your own business or doing consulting or freelance, the pros are that you are your own boss. There's radical accountability. You get to come up with the vision of what you want to produce, what you want to create, what you want to put out there, and you can pave the way from 0 to 1. If you do this right, you'll feel energized to wake up every day to work on something that you can call your own. And you have the freedom to create the workplace that you want, whether that be the number of hours you work, the ways of working across different teams. how you set the team culture, etc. And the operational speed is as fast or slow as you would like it to be as a founder. There's few to no level of sign-offs or approvals, and potentially this could be the biggest upside. But there's also a lot of cons. As I mentioned before, you are your own boss on paper, which means your true bosses are your customers and your potentially outside investors if you take funding. You're also the ultimate manager. And so are you comfortable being a role model, a caretaker, a leader of the team as you expand? Are you comfortable with making and owning every single decision of your company? It's a day-to-day high strategic level, but also down to the details. You definitely have to be accustomed to highest of swings, of highest of highs and lowest of lows, mentally, emotionally, physically. And you'll kind of see that expand and shrink over time. Another thing to consider is while the upsides are very high, financially, this is the biggest risk you may be taking if you're taking this option. You may not be paid or compensated initially when bootstrapping. And even at a bigger stage, you may need to take funding for growth, which could eat away your equity and your ownership within the company. And this is all trial and error, to be honest. There's no place for perfectionists if you're really kind of always type A and tying the T's. I think this is going to be a little bit rougher for you. There's sometimes this rule of 80-20 where you prepare for the 80 and you anticipate the 20 that you did not expect. But that's also the fun journey of entrepreneurship and freelance. And so quick recap, 3 garden options. There's more beyond this too. But I would say for big tech Fortune 500, I would say it's safest and most cushy current bet. Specialization and EQ is necessary. And for venture-backed startups, it's mid-size. I would say it's a bit of a calculated risk, especially if it's earlier in your career where you have less responsibilities, where you can explore both lateral and vertical across different functions. You may be able to advance quicker. And entrepreneurship. You are your own boss, radical accountability. You get to truly own whatever you are, producing and creating and selling, and you get to, really chart your course. And no risk and no reward. Okay, assessment time, weighing the pros and cons. I think I've touched upon these different themes throughout the pros and cons list that I've, walked you guys through so far, but just wanted to recap that. Hey, it really depends on your career goals and ambitions of today. And this can always change. You have different career life chapters as much as you have your own personal life chapters. Risk tolerance may be different in your 20s versus 30s versus 40s versus 50s. There's going to be financial impact on work-life balance. Are you single? Are you partnered? Are you growing your family? Do you have other extended family obligations that are coming up as your parents are retiring? All of these things may come into play when you're thinking about your next leap. What kind of learning opportunities are you looking for? What are some cultural fit and values? What is the long-term vision that you have set for yourself? And what type of network do you want to accrue over time is something that I'd, kind of recommend thinking through. I don't want to waste our time since we have, a short duration of time together, and I actually do want to leave some time for Q&A. And so if you want to take a screenshot or do this exercise on your own, I think that would be great. On the left side, you'll notice there's different options that you're able to consider. And then across, think about the pros and cons. Like, how would you score this? How would you rank this? And what is your reasoning behind this? Just to kind of have a level-headed way of assessing it at a higher level. Okay, and so I wanted to leave you with a few things heading into 2025. I would definitely recommend a lot of internal reflection and external research before you take your next step. And I would kind of sum it up into 4 different categories. One is work fulfillment. How satisfied are you with the work that you are doing right now? If you are not, has it been a recent thing, or has it been something that's been gnawing at you for the last 2 years? Is it something that you can change? Is it something that you cannot change based on, people dynamic, whether that be work dynamic or the scope of work that you were given? The second is transition preparation. What is the level of preparation work and exploration that you've done? Maybe you've, started off in consumer tech and all of a sudden you're like, I am really interested in aerospace. If you don't have aerospace background, definitely take the time to research what's trending, what are the latest news, who are some of these, VCs that are looking at it and see which ones are funded, which is the right direction to go. The third is your motivations. This is more internal reflection, but diving into the why at the end of the day and your professional goals in the next 5 to 10 years. And personal factors, like I mentioned before, what are some aspects that help or deter you from making the leap? And being a little bit more realistic about it and say, hey, maybe this is not the season in my life to do this, but maybe in the next, few years, it might change and I would pivot again or reconsider doing this leap. So I wanted to leave you all with 2 free resources. I've created this career transition readiness quiz in case you're curious whether or not you are ready for the next leap. Definitely a quick one, 60 seconds or less. And so if you're curious, feel free to scan and take a look. And I'm also offering 25-minute coaching discovery call. And so for anyone who's attending today, also even after the fact, and you decide to kind of work with me, happy to provide 20% off coaching. And so thanks for joining. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me via janet@embracenow.co. But I'm also happy to answer any questions if we have time. Is there anything you would go back and do differently in making the decision to transition from one to another, lessons learned? Yeah, I would say I've done a lot of switching and trying out things. I intentionally looked at my 20s and said, I want breadth of experiences because what do I know? I don't know what I want to specialize in. I don't know what I'm really good at. And so I intentionally took the time to hop around and see what made sense. And so no regrets there in that sense. I would say, one lesson that I will take away from all my experiences is this is so cliche, but people really matter. If you have a champion, if you have someone that really believes in you as a manager and they're willing to drive you up along with their journey, that's the best you can really decision you would make. Yes, of course, you have to look at the role, what type of work you'll be doing, and that's important too because you don't want to be bored or you would hate what you're doing every day. But I would say who you're working under and who would be supporting you and being your champion is the number one thing. And I think a lot of people underestimate that.